Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Brandy Jones, the Organizing Director here at Secure Families Initiative. Thank you for participating in what we are hosting as our acknowledgement that this is an anniversary of the ratification of the 14th Amendment for our country. And so we wanted to use this as a chance to discuss Black and Indigenous service members and their fight for freedom. As I'm the host, I want to say, we just celebrated the 4th of July, and that was like a time that we could, think about our nation and what it means to you, right? When we talk about these different days, it's crucial for us to reflect on that complex history that is freedom in America, especially for Black Americans. For generations, Black service members have courageously fought for the nation's ideals, often while being denied those very same immense contributions and freedoms at home. Tonight, we're wanting to honor these contributions. We're wanting to explore the ongoing fight and discuss what freedom has meant even today. I know there's a lot of discussion about different communities in our nation at the moment, and we want to make sure we hear all voices. And so this discussion is really, rooted in the 14th Amendment, which we know was brought about during Reconstruction a little bit before with Dred Scott's case. He was the first to challenge who is a citizen, and being born an enslaved man. He was actually assigned to an Army officer, and he had to travel. And once he got to a free state, he asked, well, why can't I be free if I'm here? And that's where we kind of got this groundwork of asking, who is a citizen in our nation? That was a multicultural fight for the 14th Amendment. We had people who participated from indigenous communities at the Indian Act. We had people who participated from AAPI. This has been a generational multicultural battle for citizens and rights in our country. And so, of course, all of those things pertain to military service. And I'm excited today to have our wonderful panel. I'm really honored to have the members here that have agreed to talk about their lens and their experience with the issue. And so I want to set the stage, again, by introing our guests. And so Shalina, if you could please join. Thank you for being here today and share more about yourself. Thank you.
Brandy. My name's Shalina Critchlow. First and foremost, I'm a descendant of the Liseño Rincon Band of Indians, Mesa Grande, and Santa Isabel. I'm going to open with a land acknowledgement, and then I'll follow with introductions. We acknowledge the Payum Cohesion as a traditional land caretakers of the land on which I reside on, and it's built on its surrounding traditional cultural landscapes. Today, the Payo Chum, as known as the Liseño, and are made up of 7 bands: La Jolla, Paula, Palma, Pachanga, Rincon, San Luis Rey, and Saboba. We at SFI are mindful of the indigenous people in this place, and we pay our respects to the Liseño, past, present, and emerging. We are grateful to have the opportunity to be part of this community in the Liseño territory and to honor their history, culture, and perseverance of spirit. I'm now going to follow with introductions. Today, our panelists and organizers are Brandy Jones, SFI Organizer Director, host, granddaughter of a Black Revolutionary War veteran and active spouse. We are honored to have Mel Mason, a veteran and tireless advocate, therapist, co-founder of the Village Project. We have Richard, the CEO, co-founder of Black Veterans Project. Regina, Seaside social justice activist, has been named the 27th Assembly District 2010 Woman of the Year by the Office of Assemblyman Bill Monning, co-founder of Village Project. We have Troy, retired Army Lieutenant Colonel, 20-year combat veteran, and retired civil servant, author, and SFI board member. And we have Ebony, a daughter of a 20-year U.S. Air Force veteran and the daughter-in-law of a retired Silver Star Army colonel. She serves as a board secretary for the Village Project, chairs Academic Excellence Committee, formerly served on the board of the International School of Monterey. Thank
Thank you so much, Shalina. And Shalina's our amazing regional organizing director at Secure Families Initiatives. She was a former spouse of a Marine and also a parent to a service member who also served in the military. So thank you so much, Shalina, for sharing with us. I wanted to turn it over to Memo, Mr. Mason. Thank you so much for being here today. And you have such a deep understanding of our history, stemming from your own family's resilience against racial injustice and your involvement with the Black Panther Party. Um, I would love to hear you shed some light from this vital role of Black military service members portrayed all throughout the history of our country until present day. Thank you so much.
Okay, good. And first, if I might, Brandy, is also do a land acknowledgement as well. And I was born in Kentucky. I came to California when I was 13. I'm 82 now, so I've been living out this way for quite some time. But also, I grew up with a number of people from different tribal nations, and so I wanted to pay homage to them by doing a land acknowledgement for them as well. And I want to give a special shout out to Tom Little Bear Nason, who is the tribal chairperson of the Esalen Nation here. So we acknowledge that we stand in the village of Acosta on the ancestral and unceded land of the Ohlone, Rumsen, and Esalen people. And I recognize their ongoing efforts for cultural sharing, education, and social change, as well as historical and present-day injustices they have faced with great resilience. I urge that those of us who benefit from the dispossession of these sisters and brothers to commit ourselves to reckoning with history and the legacies of imperialism and settler colonialism. We affirm these nations' sovereignty and history and strive to be responsible stewards of the lands we inhabit and build ongoing reciprocal relationships necessary for conciliation with these and all other indigenous people. And I would also like to thank you as well, Brandy, for having me here today. I think when we think about how we have been taught history, we get taught about the American Revolution, the American Revolution, not fully, but from a certain slant and from a certain viewpoint. But the truth is that Black men, both enslaved and free, were on all of the battlefields that ever existed in this country, all of the wars that were fought. We've been in them, and so and that goes from people like Crispus Attucks, who's generally considered the first casualty of the so-called American Revolution, to the brave men of the Rhode Island Regiment. Their courage was undeniable. Yet after the war, many returned to bondage or faced continued discrimination. And so this is a paradox that we've had to deal with from all of those wars, through the Civil Wars, through both World Wars, and into the Civil Rights era. And the Civil Rights era, we also had somebody by the name of Medgar Evers, who was considered a hero in World War II, who was assassinated because when he came back home, he fought for the equality that had eluded his people before he went off to fight in World War II, and was still there and present and strong when he came home. So one of the reasons why many of us went to fight for this country is to show them that we're patriotic, that we love the country, and then we were hoping as a result of that display of love and courage, that when we came back home, that we would be faced with a whole new society, a society that cared about us, a society of that where no longer racial injustice existed. But when he came back to the same system that he left. We had systems of oppression that were so entrenched that we had, and I can remember as a kid reading in Ebony magazine about Black soldiers coming home from World War II, who would have been considered heroes in any country, and were actually considered heroes in other countries, who were shot and killed when they got home, because they had the audacity to wear the GI uniform, wearing the uniform of the country that they went over to fight for. Um, and in one case, there was a gentleman, I'm trying to think of his name right now, but he was one of the ones that was in Ebony. His name is Sergeant Isaac Woodard Jr. He was a highly decorated veteran of World War II. Came home to his hometown in South Carolina, and the bus driver took offense at him wearing a uniform, especially a uniform with medals on it to boot, and got into some kind of an altercation with him, called the police, and the police came to drug him off of the bus, and they beat him senseless. He almost died, and he was blind for the rest of his life, simply because he had the audacity to wear the uniform of the United States of America that he had worn and represented when he was in World War II, supposedly defending freedom. My own father, and I hope it's okay for me to work this into this section of the show.
Please.
But it's impossible for me to talk about all of this without talking about him. I was 2 years old when he came home from World War II. I can remember him coming home. My mom was always amazed at the fact that I remembered all the details, what he wore, the duffel bag that he had, coming through the screen door, grabbing my mom, kissing her and said, "Baby, I'm back," and coming over to me and said, "This is my boy," and picked me up and kissed me. That was probably one of the very last times that I saw him when he was sane. My dad was suffering from what we now call post-traumatic stress disorder. There was no benefits for him. There was no, compensation for the disability that the war had caused him. He had watched almost all of his friends die in World War II. And I never knew all of that. But what I did know was that I had the craziest father in the world. And as a kid, I was scared of him. I grew up to not like him. He and my mom divorced, and that's one of the reasons why we ended up in California. But I spent much of my life and stuff, wanting to beat him up because he had scared me so badly when I was a child. Thank goodness I got past that, and I was able to actually reconcile with my dad probably about 3 or 4 years before he passed away, and I was glad I did that. Because then I began to understand that what had happened to him, I was no longer thinking of him with a child's mind, but thinking about him as someone who was an adult and was rational and knew that he had paid a severe price for having gone over to, in his mind, defend this country and then come back, hopefully, to a country that was much better. I often tell people my father gave and lost his mind for a country that hated him. And he tried to show how much he loved this country. So, and then when we get back to Medgar Evers again, Medgar Evers was assassinated, was killed, for trying to make this country the place that he thought it was going to be as a result of his participation in World War II. So you have this paradox, and maybe this is something that we'll discuss more. But we'll have this paradox. I lost my childhood friend, my best friend from childhood in Vietnam. Well, I ended up being an anti-war activist as well as a member of the Black Panther Party, which means that I was continuing to be an anti-war activist as well. But I think of him often as I think of my dad who passed away in 1983. I was so happy that I had reconciled with him. I was just sorry that I was not ever able to see, my friend from childhood again because he died in the war. So I don't want to go on and on, but I think that's the paradox we have to deal with. And in one of my greatest historical heroes, W.E.B. Du Bois, I remember reading about him and how he had actually urged blacks to fight in World War I under the impression or under the thinking that if blacks fought in World War I, even though the military was segregated as it was throughout World War II, that they would, by their participation, they would come home to a much better place. And of course, that didn't happen, and he was really disillusioned and he wrote this book called I think it was the Wounded Country or something, and in which he talked about the paradox that blacks were living through with these wars, and he never again asked black people to participate in wars or even the military after that, because he felt like he was so disillusioned and so hurt by what happened that he would never again ask blacks to participate. So that's just kind of an example for me, I guess, and I know I ramble quite a bit here, but that's kind of an example for me of the paradox that we'll probably be discussing. And I'm so glad to have brothers on here who were in the military, who excelled and succeeded, and for them to be able to give their perspective and stuff as well. I'm also a person who went into the military, and then got a bad conduct discharge because I had to defend myself against two racist NCOs. That shaped my thinking as well. So with that, I think I'll just stop rambling, and then we can go on to the next person.
Mr. Mason, thank you so much for sharing. And it is not rambling. You are amazing for sharing what you've been through in your family and bringing that legacy to share for all of us to learn from in this pivotal moment when we need to hear what has happened in the past so that we can have redress, so that we can talk about the future and what we'd like to see in the community that we'd like to see built. I just really thank you, and I appreciate every word that you're sharing with us today. I would like now to talk with Richard as the CEO and the co-founder of the Black Veterans Project. You're at the forefront of addressing racial inequalities for veterans. Could you share a bit about the work that you lead, even drawing on your own experience as a veteran? Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. It's so wonderful to be in community with all of you. My name is Richard Brookshire. I am the co-founder and the co-CEO of the Black Veterans Project. We've been around for at least 7 years in November. I served for 7 years as well as an infantry combat medic. 4 of those years were in the were on active duty, and the remainder were in the New York National Guard, deployed to Afghanistan in 2011. When I got out the military in 2016, I experienced a really difficult transition and had a lot of difficulty accessing mental health care, like so many folks I think can relate to. And unfortunately, that led to a very rapid deterioration of my mental health, where I essentially lost my job, almost ended up homeless if it weren't for my mother moving to New York and trying to help rehabilitate me. But even with her support, it still led to a suicide attempt. It was when I survived that suicide attempt. I read a book when I was in the psych ward called, that had been on my shelf since graduate school, but I hadn't cracked it open, called When Affirmative Action Was White. And it talks about the advent of social welfare policies following World War II, namely the New Deal and the GI Bill, and the ways in which they were administered and structured really to abide by discrimination and racism and to perpetuate it, and how many of those programs ended up building the white middle class to the detriment generationally of Black folks and their descendants. That planted a seed for me because I understood kind of the ways in which benefit obstruction was also perpetuating itself in the kind of the modern day. Had just come out of policy school, I understood the importance of data. And so I scoured the internet to read everything that I could possibly find around racial inequities affecting Black veterans in the last 20 years, and couldn't find anything super substantive. And there was also a dearth of reporting about issues that were so obvious, when I kind of took a look at the communities that I was seeing in New York City. I remember going to an event that the Department of, I believe the Department of Labor was putting on in the city. And it struck me that the vast majority of unemployed folks that had shown up were veterans that were Black vets who had experienced homelessness, experienced incarceration, were obviously experiencing joblessness. And so I wanted to try to get a better sense of what the issues were and how we could measure those issues and advocate against them. One of the things that I quickly learned was that there was a dearth of real advocacy around issues of racial justice, both in the military and across the veterans landscape, even though there was this confluence of very well-resourced and moneyed veterans organizations like the American Legion, the Veteran for Foreign Wars, Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America. But there seemed to be this racial blind spot where that they wouldn't necessarily talk about issues of race, even though they were so obvious and needing to be addressed in some fashion. And then you had on the civil rights side, the storied legacy organization like the NAACP and the Urban League, who for whatever reason stopped paying attention to the racial justice issues that were kind of transpiring both in uniform, but also affecting millions of Black veterans and their families. And so we founded the Black Veterans Project, really as a kind of a research and narrative-driven project in its inception, but it has since morphed into a reparations project. And so what do we mean by that? We work across three spheres, both impact litigation, narrative, kind of storytelling strategy, and then mobilization and advocacy. Our most robust work to date has been on the impact litigation side. We structured a partnership with Yale Law School and conducted the largest race-based data query in the history of the Department of Veteran Affairs. Anecdotally, Black vets have been speaking for decades about racial discrimination that they were facing and access to benefits, but they actually couldn't prove it through data, and they didn't have access to the numbers from the VA. Our litigation was able to compel the VA to release said data for the first time in its history. We looked at 20 years of disparity data relating to PTSD compensation, or compensation relating to disability in general. But one of the major findings that we did discover was that the VA had studied the issue of racial disparities relating to disability compensation on 4 separate occasions, namely PTSD disparities in 2003, 2006, 2009, and in 2017. Our litigation began in 2020. Every single time they studied the issue, essentially the administration that was overseeing it would bury that data, would fail to act on that data. And because of it, a quite large disparity in denial rates perpetuated itself over 20 years. Over a 5-year period, there was almost a 30% greater likelihood that if a Black veteran anywhere in the country went and filed for a PTSD claim, that they would be flat out denied for it. Numbers were exacerbated in the Deep South and in places like Puerto Rico. And then over the course of the last year, we were able to work in tandem with some folks at the VA to get some more concrete numbers around the damage. And now we know that about 100,000 Black veterans, mostly concentrated in the South, were unjustly denied access to PTSD compensation and care to the tune of almost $2 billion in lost compensation that they would have otherwise received. And so when we think about building out the case for reparative justice, it's comprehensive. It's not just talking about the legacy of the GI Bill, where less than 5% of the 1 million returning Black GIs after World War II came home, to racial covenants, to redlining, and weren't able to purchase homes that had a generational impact. Brandeis University did a study that said that on average, Black veterans and their families lost out on about $180,000 of wealth generating opportunity from inaccess to the GI Bill that carried over generationally. And so our work has really been to kind of tie that thread and then to litigate it in the courts. And so the data and the evidence that we've been able to gather is undergirding a landmark case called Monk versus United States. I'll just quickly tell Monk's story. Monk is a Conley Monk was a Vietnam era vet who served 2 tours of duty in Vietnam, volunteered to go off at the height of the draft, and found himself on the other side of a dishonorable discharge because he got into an altercation with the white superior who called him a racial epithet. He then, found himself signing paperwork that would lock him out of his benefits for over 40 years. In 2015, he was able to finally get a discharge upgrade and get access to some level of benefit, but he didn't get back pay for the decades that he didn't get access. And so he's leveraging the data that we were able to glean to make the argument that the VA owes him $1 million in damages and in back pay for not being able to access education benefits, of which I've used almost $500,000 to go to school. So it's quite substantive, that benefit. The inability to use the VA home loan since 1971, the inability to leverage education benefits to send his kids to school if he would have chosen to do so, let alone the PTSD or other kinds of disability that he would have been privy to had the VA been addressing these racial disparities and taking his claim seriously. He's also, what makes the case rather significant as well, is that he's suing on behalf of his deceased father, who was a World War II veteran who did not get access to the GI Bill. And so this kind of intergenerational struggle plays out in Black veterans' families all the time. In the fall, we have cleared 2 major legal hurdles over the last 2 years with the case Monk versus United States, the motion to dismiss, which makes it one of the first reparations cases in American history to survive a motion to dismiss, and then also a motion for leave, which was a very aggressive action by the federal government to try to get the case kicked out of court. And in the fall, it is likely to certify as a class action, which would make it the first race-based class action against the Department of Veteran Affairs. And happy to talk more in depth about some of our other work, but that's kind of at the core of what we're trying to actualize.
Good.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, Richard, for all of the work that you've been doing. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us. I'm just like blown away. Wow. I can't wait to talk more about this. Again, this is going to be the first of many discussions that we will be having about these issues that we're discussing today. Thank you so much. I want to turn over to Mrs. Mason, Ms. Regina. Thank you so much for joining us today. I know that you have always been working and spending much of your life fighting for the disempowered, to co-founding the Village Project. How has your extensive experience as a social justice activist and your work with the NAACP shaped the community? Thank you.
Hi, Brandy. Thank you so very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be in community with each of you panelists and listening to your stories. Yeah, so I actually I call myself a military brat. My father was in the military and several of my uncles and relatives. And so I came from a military family. Although when I was 5 years old, my parents divorced, but I have lived here all of my life. And I was born on a military base called Fort Ord, which is here, and it's now closed under the Clinton administration with a base realignment. And so my work around civil rights has to do with just the injustices that I have seen throughout my childhood onward and even to this day. I'll give you an example. Growing up in Seaside, which is predominantly at that time, there were over 30% of the residents of Seaside were of African ancestry. Today, fast forward 2025, and there's probably about 25 to 3,000 people of African ancestry left here in this community. And so I've spent a considerable amount of my time basically as a social worker in the field of child welfare. And I cross-referenced with military families that had child abuse issues when they needed to be placed in out-of-home care. So I've been all over Monterey County, South Monterey County, North Monterey County, and seeing inequities and people living in poverty and people living in very wealthy communities in Monterey County. And so when it comes to people of African ancestry, it's a very segregated world. When the base closed, then people lost their jobs, and housing was not available for people. And I just saw countless young people having to leave our community because if their parents died or, you know, basically most of the people that I grew up with have died early deaths in this community because on Fort Ord, it was a toxic waste ground. And many of the folks that I grew up with, all of my childhood friends, their families, I'm a breast cancer survivor myself, but I can look at the women in this community that have acquired breast cancer, and there's a high incident of health disparities in Monterey County. So what I have done in my lifetime is to look at the data that exists to see the disparities that have been prevalent for people of African ancestry primarily. And so I spent most of my career as a social worker and as someone that's been involved in the NAACP, working with youth in the NAACP for probably about 25 years. I spent as a youth advisor for the Monterey chapter of the NAACP. And so I have something called lived experiences, identifying people that are most of the people that live here in this community that have long-term ties to the Seaside area are descendants of the military. And so one of my passions right now is looking at that land out on Fort Ord and seeing all the Black people that are homeless. In fact, we had a person that was of African ancestry die in our parking lot because he was homeless, and he was the son of a veteran. And so I think that disparities for me continue to kind of knock on my door, because there's no real kind of like legal defense fund available to people who are experiencing the disparities that exist here in this community. And so the Village Project is one such project that came to fruition as a result of mine and others' awareness that disparities were happening for children of veterans and grandchildren, and their families died for this country, and they don't even have a piece of land or home ownership in Monterey County. And we're being out migrated from this area. And so, having said that, I do a lot of my volunteer work, ensuring that we educate our young people, especially about their ancestry, their heritage, and the contributions that were made from the beginning of time by people of African ancestry. And when you look at the military, I also sit on the Veterans Transition Center Board of Directors. And everyone in there was the McKinney Act that happened when the base closed, and there's not one organization of African ancestry that's Black led that has any of that land given to them under the McKinney Act. And so I think that that is another battle that is going to have to be waged, because when we look around, you see a lot of developers coming into the community, and the homes are now $1.5 million. And even in Seaside, this is a beautiful, beautiful community. You can stand anywhere on any corner and see the ocean. But the children of this community they don't have parity when it comes to the educational system, jobs, and so on and so forth. So I spend a lot of my time helping to ensure that I give back in a way that educates young people to ensure that they get their education. And Iminyata Saturday School, I think that someone mentioned that, is one such program that's research-based that we're doing with our young children of African ancestry. It's been now researched through Loyola Marymount University. They're the statewide evaluators, and we have a local evaluator. And the research has shown now that for every $1 you spend engaging with an African American organization such as ours, saves you $5. And so, in fact, we're in the process of taking 31 people to Ghana, Africa, next week, so that our children can see the land of our ancestry. Because, slavery happened, and our kids don't get educated around their African heritage and their culture. And so now with this critical race theory, they're banning books in schools. So when you look around, every military base there is, it's the same situation, where all of the military bases that have closed down under the Clinton administration's base realignment, Black people don't have a stake in acquiring any of that land. And so we're going to have to kind of go to war around that, because the bottom line is that our fathers and grandfathers died for this country, and we deserve to have some of that land on Fort Ord, so that our people can stay here and make sure that they have the parity that they so truly deserve. And the other thing is that with regards to my role, I was also a branch president of the local branch of the NAACP here. And so we have had multiple military people come to the NAACP to get legal help. All of us are volunteers. So I think that now we're going to have to start looking at, ensuring that people have legal defense funds so that they can, really truly be able to fight the good fight that's necessary. Because when you don't have money, you cannot buy an attorney. So a lot of the work that I do right now is spent going to court with people, and our whole agency is a culturally affirming agency, and we don't not only serve people of African ancestry, even though our agency was founded to serve that population. We serve all people that come for help. And the greatest need that people have right now is they're living in poverty. They basically don't have food, and children don't have books, and so on and so forth. So a lot of the work that we do here in the agency centers around ensuring that equity happens for kids, and not just African American children, but for all kids that come here for services, and adults as well as others. And so I'm going to leave it at that for now, but there's a lot more that I have to share related to the inequitable distribution of America's resources that aren't going into African American affirming communities. So thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing everything. I'm taking it in, Miss Regina, as an educator myself. Like, we know that our children cannot learn unless their needs are met. Our basic needs have to be met in order to be in the classroom, to be participating. And like I said, the study has come out. We know that when, especially our children who are from African ancestry, learn about their roots, which I know, Mr. Mason, you have done this work, the original people to do this work, they have a higher rate of success when they feel confident and have that self-confidence in where you come from. So thank you both. And we are very excited here at SFI about your group's trip to Africa. Please keep us updated. I mean, this is amazing. Thank you for the work that you're doing.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Shalina, I would love to turn it over to you. I know, as a military parent and our Indigenous member, like, there's so much that you have that's so important to this story, where we find ourselves in this moment and in the history of our nation. We know that our Indigenous communities serve at the highest rate of any culture within the military. And so we'd love to hear your thoughts on this topic. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Brandy, and thank you everyone for sharing. So my journey as a mother to a Marine and a former military spouse during the Iraq War gave me direct insight into the sacrifices and resilience of military families. It's truly a complex experience. BIPOC families, these challenges can be compounded by systematic issues both within, outside the military, and within. I think our family had experienced multiple layers of different issues that I don't think our family should have experienced. Um, like Brandy mentioned, I'm a regional organizer for Secure Family Initiative, but my volunteer experience happened when I was a young military spouse, and I volunteered for the Armed Service, YMCA, local food banks, Toys for Tots, anything that I could contribute to my community and to keep busy. As a descendant of the Listeño Rincon Band of Indians and Ipe Nation of Santa Isabel, I also see the parallel struggles and strengths within the Indigenous communities. My work with Secure Family Initiative and my volunteer efforts are all about bridging gaps, providing support, and ensuring these families have access to the resources they need, retaining our traditions and culture. As I advocate for Indigenous communities, also strengthens identity and fosters resilience for all families facing adversity. And I think everyone mentioned that. Um, us going to different duty stations, Alabama, 29 Palms, Camp Pendleton, I always try to make sure to search for powwow ceremonies just to make sure that my boys grew up with their culture and tradition. So that was something that I really, really try to do for my family. I want to bring up some current or a current situation that happened. There was a news of Narciso Barranco, a Marine father, being subjected to a violent arrest by Border Patrol agents here in Southern California. It has sparked widespread outrage and raised serious questions about treatment of individuals, especially those with ties to the military. The video showing him being repeatedly punched and pepper sprayed while on the ground is disturbing and directly contrasts with the values of service and protection that military families hold dear. The incident carries profound implications for other military parents and families, resonating on several levels: a sense of betrayal and disillusionment. For military parents, especially those whose children have served or currently serving, this event can evoke strong sense of betrayal and disillusionment, like I said. They've raised their children to defend a nation's values, only to see a parent of a service member subjected to excessive force by federal agents. I want to quote Alejandro Barranco's statement that he gave. Um, uh, he basically he's an active Marine, or he's a Marine veteran, I should say, and this is what he quoted: "I felt betrayed because these are my people. My dad is my people, my community is my people, military is my people. At the end of the day, it's my people. The community is my people. And it's my people against my people, and I feel hurt." This sentiment highlights a deep personal impact when the system they or their children serve appears to act against their own. And now we see what's happening in the MacArthur Park in LA. And I'll close with that.
Thank you, Shalina. I know that was not easy to share as a parent who just this time last year, your son was, if I could share, deployed to the Red Sea on October 7th as a Marine. And the thought, like, later that you would be here at home having this happen on the streets that you live on, I know it's just been heart-wrenching. I know for myself, the unit involved in Los Angeles, my spouse served with in Iraq in 2007. Back in 2004, I would have never imagined that that same unit would be deployed to the streets of Los Angeles, where we later were welcomed as a family there when my husband attended the University of Southern California. So I know that these times are like, there's history of how we got here, and then there's the moment we find ourselves in. And so I really love like talking with you each individually, because I think this is a very unique group to cover a lot of that ground that needs to still be discussed, that we have never had the opportunity to share, like Mr. Gina said, from our lived experience. And that's what this is really about. It's our voices. We have lived this. We are advocates. We have heard this in our community. And so thank you all for sharing these very difficult things, and also for being that type of person to advocate in our community. We need, this is not the time to be silent, for sure. I would love to talk with you, Ms. Ebony Glover. Thank you for participating today. Please share more about your experience with the and your connection to the military. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I'm so happy to be here, and thank you to SFI for having me and us here today. Well, let's just say this. I have an on again, off again love affair with speech pathology. Particularly, I work in child language and neurogenetic disorders and differences. So that directly connects with my work with the Village Project. So often, communication barriers can exacerbate existing inequities. So especially for our underserved communities, the families dealing with the stresses unique to residual military life. So as a secretary for the Village Project, I see firsthand the critical need for the holistic support. We deal with, or we have, from clinical services and academic tutoring, like was said before, to the reentry back into society from prison for some of our adults in the community. So my goal is to bring culturally competent care into our African-centered small schoolhouse setting, ensuring that the children from Black military families and all families have that foundational communication skills they need to thrive. So my involvement is with culturally responsive teaching and emphasizing interdisciplinary approaches to that neurodevelopmental differences, which our students get over-identified in behavior, but maybe under-identified when it comes to care. So by focusing on both direct therapeutic support and broader community empowerment through organizations like ours, I do believe that we can build a stronger, more resilient family units and directly pursue true equity and well-being. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Ebony. And I love I'm like admiring you, the statue behind you. It's like touching my heart, and I appreciate your, I know you're very humble, but Ebony, I know you're also a child of a service member. And I just want to say, like, thank you for being here today and working in this community that you yourself grew up as a member of the military, and now you're helping those children of those members. So it's so important. Like, what a full circle moment. And thank you for being that person. So I'd love an opportunity for Troy Mosley to share with us. Thank you so much for hopping on the call today.
It is my distinct pleasure to be part of such an august panel.
Oh no.
I think we lost Troy just for a moment. I know that I still see your name, Troy. I don't know if you can hear me. We'll give it just a few minutes, but thank you so much for being here today. And I'm really excited to hear more. I know that you've lived so much experience within the military as a service member, veteran yourself, and just that you've authored books about this topic. So thank you so much. There we go. Hey.
Sorry about that. As I alluded, my first duty station was at Fort Ord, California, and I have fond memories there. I participated in a program by the ROCKS organization of Black military officers where we tutored young students. And I had a young boy by the name of Terrence that I taught multiplication tables to on the weekend. So good memories there. As far as my perspective, what I hope to bring to the panel is a story that is like many descendants of Americans' chattel slavery. My father grew up very poor, 9 brothers and sisters, in a family of sharecroppers in West Florida. He was born in 1946. His mother had an 8th grade education, and she knew if her children were to have a better life, it would be through education. Fortunately for them, they lived in the shadow of one of our prominent historically Black colleges and universities, Florida A&M University. And of the 5 children that did go into college, one became a dentist. My father became a businessman. He was commissioned at Florida A&M. His younger brother is a pharmacist. I have 2 aunts. One has a PhD in education, and one has a master's in education. And I knew, but not for his service in the military and his education, I probably too would have grown up doing something not far removed from sharecropping. In his travels, when he left the Army in 1972 and became part of corporate America, uh, I encountered what I describe in my book as my awakening experience. It's that moment in time where you realize the rest of society views you differently because of the color of your skin. And in my instance, I was in an Atlanta airport, rambunctious 8-year-old running around the gift shop. I put a Confederate patrol cap on my head. My mother stopped me cold in my tracks. Up until that point, she had been giving me great latitude, and she took the hat from me. There was no discussion, no conversation, but I knew I had broached some serious protocol. When we got home, I asked her, and she told me, son, that hat was worn by men who fought to keep our ancestors enslaved. And her comments hit me like 10 tons of bricks. And my only reference to slavery was the 10 Commandments movie starring Charlton Heston. And no one had to say anything more than that. I felt hundreds of years of shame transgress upon my innocence. And Ever since then, I became an avid reader of civil rights history, of Civil War history, and it was always very perverse to me that the United States Army would have military bases that were named for people who committed treason to preserve slavery. So when I wrote my book, I laid out about a half dozen different efforts or initiatives that the military needed to continue in order to complete their march for American society and the armed forces to become a more perfect union and more perfect institutions. One of those recommendations was the renaming of those military bases that were named to honor men that do not deserve such an honor. And I started a nonprofit organization behind that effort in 2015. And through 6 years of toil and the racial inflection moment that was the murder of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, the rest of American society was able to see the perverse nature of how we were using our taxpayer dollars to fund bases that were named for people who wanted to continue American chattel slavery. And it is also not lost on me, and I'm sure this panel as well recognizes the perilous times that we live in, and that the renaming of these bases, not back to the actual people, but for people who share the same surnames, is an attempt to erase the contributions of all Americans from all communities. And we say in the military, uh, all gave some gave all. And this attempt to rename these bases is an attempt to steal that equity that our forefathers have earned for us through their service, through their selfless service, some paying the ultimate price. And a famous person once said, he controls the past, controls the present, he controls the present, controls the future. And the removal of the contributions of all Americans, the renaming of ships named for Medgar Evers and gay sailors who served admirably and with distinction, is an attempt to remove those contributions and preserve a system that was built on the false notion of racial supremacy. And it is my greatest hope that we can unite all communities, put our differences aside, whatever they may be, and understand that we have an existential threat that we're in the midst of, and we need to close ranks and walk shoulder to overcome it. I'm also encouraged by the fact that progress is not always a straight line moving from left to right. Sometimes you have to go backwards in order to gain perspective. And I think that's right where we are at this moment in time. And I hope that everyone can see the landscape as clearly as the folks on this panel. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Troy, for sharing with us. And I remember the first time that we were able to speak on the show at SFI, it was approximately 2 years ago. And it was like amazing because you were on the committee to rename these bases. And we were just ecstatic with this hope and all the work that you have put into it. And so in this moment, yes, we are so disheartened as a military community to see that the names of these bases are still reflecting people who are traitors to our nation, instead of honoring, which is what the goal was, to honor those who've served with dignity and with honor to elevate them to that level that they should be. So I again, at SFI, we are continuing. This will not be this is the first of many conversations about this issue. So please continue to stay tuned. And we like to call it rapid response. We are on the ground. We are talking about these issues. We are making sure that we are addressing them as we are hearing from our community that these are things that are changing their mind on service, not just within retention, our members who are currently serving, but within recruiting, because we know that those who serve, majority come from families of service like ours. And so in having that knowledge, what does it say to those who are looking to enlist now and their parents like us when we see this erasure happening? What are we supposed to do when we see that? And so stay tuned for more from SFI on this issue specifically. So thank you so much again, Troy. I would love to take this time to pose a couple questions to our panelists. Number one, and we can start in the same order we just went around, or however you feel if you're wanting to take this question, but what Given the historical and the current challenges that we are discussing, what are concrete steps that individuals can take to support Black service members and Indigenous members? Whether that's in like locally on a national scale, like what are things that you have found in your time here within your communities have helped when discussing this issue? And please feel free. I'm going to go back on my mute. Yeah.
And I'm just really thrilled to be on this panel. This is an incredible group of folk that we have here. You know, I want to always make sure, and when I talk with folks in this community and beyond, about numerous issues, especially those issues that impact, African ancestry people. One of the things that we talk about a lot here, and for obvious reasons, is that because this was always known as a military town and always as a Black military town. And one of the things that I think needs to happen now is that there still needs to be that sense of connection between Black service people and the communities that they happen to be stationed outside of. And for the community needs to see Black folks who are stationed in military bases that are next to their communities as being part of their community. That's the mindset that needs to happen. One of the things that I did, just as an example, maybe a small one, is that I was a member of the Seaside City Council here in 1980 to 1984. I got elected when a lot of racist whites did not want me, certainly with my history, to be on a city council, and had threatened to kill me and stuff. Thank goodness I'm still alive. But one of the things that I did as a city council member was to defend Black soldiers who were being wrongfully prosecuted for some of the most incredible charges that you could think of. And so I used my position to do that. And then what happened was that we had other organizations like our NAACP branch, which I was also a president of multiple times as well. Because what the government needed to see was that these Black soldiers who were being wrongfully prosecuted, and just about all of them were actually exonerated, and that was primarily because of support that was very visible from the community. And I was using my office, as well as then we started to use the offices of other organizations to go out on the base. They actually tried to ban us from coming onto the base, but we were out there because we said we had a right to be there for every single hearing. And I don't think they could put all of us in jail. They may have wanted to, but we continued to go out there. And so as one after another of them got found not guilty, or whatever the term is that they use in the military, that just reinforced the idea that, hey, just because somebody joins the military, it doesn't make them any different than any one of us. Racism in the military, as I can attest to, is the racism that exists everywhere else. It's not the Air Force version of racism. It's racism, period. In my particular instance, I would have loved for somebody to have helped me out, but I ended up being given a bad conduct discharge, which later I had to pretty much on my own get assistance, and I got assistance from a pretty unlikely source. It was a U.S. senator named Thomas Kuechel, and he basically told me that he got lots of people who contact him when they get thrown out of the military, and he goes and finds out that they should have been thrown out of the military. In my particular instance, he assigned somebody to the case. They went back and they looked at the history of racism that I had faced, and up to and including being intimidated to the point where I had to physically defend myself. Of course, I've defended myself against NCOs. And so I ended up being court-martialed, served some time, in the stocks, as we called it, the stockade, and then was drummed out of the military with a bad conduct discharge. I also played basketball. I played basketball actually for the Air Force, but I had also in my mind the career. I was going to play in the NBA. Some of the people that I played against in high school and in college, went on to play there. I thought I was good, and they did too. That was books because I took a stand against racism at a university that I got a scholarship to, and my career was over. They took my scholarship, threw me out of school. The NCAA ruled that I was not allowed to play ball at any other university in the country. So I was straight over. But anyway, that served my mom, as my mom would say to me a number of times. I think God has something else for you to do, and I was pretty pissed off with God. At the time, I couldn't tell my mom that, but if God had something to do with the ending of my career, I was upset with him. But anyway, we moved on, and so my life changed. I became an activist, as was pointed out earlier. And the beginning of my activism actually was with the Black Panther Party, and I owe the Black Panther Party a lot in terms of what I became as an activist. And I'm just glad that I'm still alive, to be able to execute all of that. But I think that the thing that that the military, that the government itself needs to see is that we don't give up our support of our sisters and brothers when they join the military. That some of you may remember Billy Dean Smith. Billy Dean Smith came back from Vietnam. He was supposed to have killed, was a commanding officer, some guy. Well, I was part of that committee as well, and Billy Dean got off. And so, but had that not been this kind of support, and then actually he got support from all the way around the world. But we can't leave our Black GIs isolated. Certainly, they can organize and have their own organizations, at the fort or at the installation where they might be. But there has to be that connection between them and the community, and the government needs to see that the community supports them. We consider them to be a part of our community. And finally, I'd like to say too, because both Regina and I have long held leadership positions in our branch of the NAACP, and one of the committees that we have in the NAACP is a Veterans Committee. And so that Veterans Committee is about looking out. It's about providing a sense of welfare, sense of help, sense of support for those veterans in our community. And I think, as Regina pointed out, we found that Black veterans, the disparities that exist in terms of them being able to get the compensation that they should get. And I think Brother Troy and I think also Brother Richard had pointed to this, that coming out of the military injured, whether you're injured mentally or physically, that Blacks, if they get any kind of disability compensation at all, is probably way less than what they should be getting. And so our Veterans Committee with our NAACP branch is out there. It's headed up by a veteran, and so we know exactly what it is that veterans, especially Black veterans, go through. So we have that committee, but that committee also continues to give us that supportive link between ourselves and our PI sisters and brothers and stuff, whether they're retired, whether they're out of the military, or whether they're in the military. So I think that kind of support is absolutely critical and necessary for the well-being of our Black veterans in the military.
I thank you, Mr. Reese. I know I saw Ebony and Troy. I just want to say, because you're very humble, you and Miss Regina, your program at the Village Project, I want to just take this moment to say something about that in particular. The program that you all have founded is to take people can come off the street and receive mental health care from professionals who also have this lived experience. And that is, I've never seen anything like it. So thank you for the work that you have already been doing and have done tirelessly, helping our community feel connected, helping people who are Black, who are of all, like you said, all communities be connected in that way. So I just wanted to say that. I know I saw Ebony's hand.
Okay. Yes. As you were saying earlier, about the office that I'm in. I'm in the office of my father-in-law who just turned 94 this weekend, and he was such an anomaly in the realm of his service as a colonel, and then coming in and his life after getting into real estate. And I think that's kind of part of the piece too that's missing, with a lot of our veterans and retired veterans. They don't have housing. It's
Mhm.
so expensive here to live. And I'm working with like the children and the grandchildren and great grandchildren actually in this community. It's that is historically diverse. This was a working and middle class population. Like Regina has said, that's been out migrated due to the base closure, rising costs, and then the lack of local industry in this area. So the intention is needed for this wraparound care that becomes even more urgent. um I always the call it like the big mama syndrome, like where big mama's house, that may be like the last anchor, right? And when she passes, that stability goes with her. Without guidance, many families lose that property, that history, and the inheritance of rootedness. So definitely I'm trying to bring that back into it. And so that academic support is equally crucial there. So the children deserve these tutors, these teachers, these advocates, who recognize their brilliance even when it shows up differently. And whether they need speech therapy, specialized services, or just simply someone that believes in their potential. That's what I'm here to do, get that culturally rooted education and offer that, more than just help. And so that's, I think, part of the issue too, is just having that stability of having a place to call home for a lot of them.
Mhm.
Thank you so much, Ebony. And I know you shared about your father-in-law. And I just want to say, he's an amazing person and a
Mhm.
hero. Having come home with a Silver Star, which is one of our highest awarded medals in the military that a person can receive. So I just want to highlight that. And this was at a time when, like we were discussing, we didn't have the civil rights movement. This is before we had some of the integration in our service. And we like to say here at Secure Families Initiative, yes, we integrated our military 75 years ago around that time. But
Mhm.
this is our chance to stop and ask, how is that actually going for everyone? And what we're hearing back from our community of those we are actively serving is the number one issue people are having as families is that their children are being racial and ethnically bullied in the communities that they're living in. So these issues are things that we are hearing now from families as we're asking that question. And so that's the issues that we're attempting to tackle because they're important to our families, to our citizens, but also to our national security when this is the issue that you're coming across as you're currently defending your nation.
Mhm.
Thank you. I would love to turn it. I know, Troy, you had your hand raised as well.
No, just very quickly and anecdotally, I wanted to share with the group. I'm sure Richard probably already knows this, and many others may know as well. But the level of disregard and vitriol that this administration has for our Black and Brown service members, they have made a condition known as shaving bumps as disqualifying for someone for military service. You can now be separated for having shaving bumps, and that is a sad commentary.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for highlighting that, Troy. And I want to give everyone a chance. I know we're nearing our hour conversation. Again, first of many. If there's something that you'd like to share in closing, I know for me, like hearing all of you today speak to the different issues that are still collective issues within our community has been wonderful. It's been really like making me think about the stories we don't hear and why it's
Mhm.
important for us to make sure that we are sharing these stories in this moment. We're representing our community, representing our family and our legacy at a time when that's trying to be erased. And even hearing the historical context, like myself being from Black men who have served honorably in our nation from the founding, each time, like for my grandfather who served in the American Revolution, fighting in 3 battles as a Black man, surviving enslavement, he still had to fight Congress for his petition.
Mm-hmm.
He had to still fight for what he was owed. So we have that documentation as a family, which allowed us to trace our lineage back to that time.
Mm-hmm.
But then his grandson, my grandfather, 6 generations later, found himself in the same situation, fighting again
Mm-hmm.
for the medal that he was owed, that he was earned and promised, the Medal of Honor. And so that fight took another 70 years for him, and he wasn't alive to see that day when it happened.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're talking about these issues and what they look like and how they impact our families. We're talking about historically, we're talking about currently, because I'm still impacted by those things that my grandfathers fought for and
Mm-hmm.
why they didn't receive them when they earned them. I don't quite understand that.
Mm-hmm.
So it impacts my like now as a spouse active duty, that impacts my outlook on that. And as we have children who are college age, they did not sign up for the military. They signed up to go to school. And so
Mm-hmm.
we need to get to those discussions, the larger discussions on why that is and how that
Mm-hmm.
impacts us as a nation. And especially, like, I know, Troy, you shared with me earlier, when it comes to Black families, we are really that canary in the coal mine. And it's
Mm-hmm.
important, like, we have been dealing with these issues historically for hundreds of years.
Right.
So it's important that we have this narrative as well shared in this moment,
Mm-hmm.
because we are where this story originates, our Indigenous community, our Black community here in our country. So
Mm-hmm.
thank you all for taking the time to talk about that. Please share your closing thoughts. I'll start with Mr. Mesa.
Okay. And we hear a lot, and for good reason, that with this current administration, especially, and I've always been of the mind that it doesn't matter what administration is in, we're always at the end, at the lowest ring. This one is doing blatantly what a lot of the other administrations had done, kind of undercover or sneakily or whatever you want to call it. But for us, it's about not giving up. It's for us. It's always about the mindset of we're gonna not just get through this, but we're gonna emerge victorious. We can ill afford to say, my God, this, all of this stuff here is happening and stuff. That's the end of us. No, we have to have the mindset that got us through 400 years of enslavement, all of the years of Jim Crow. The fact that we are still here, means that we are resilient beyond belief. And we have to make sure that we keep that understanding. Trump will come and go. Those administrations will come and go. But we will not come and go. We're here, and that we're going to stay. And so all of the struggles that we've led and all the struggles that we've influenced and been part of that's led to our continued existence, we need to have the same mindset and that same sense of struggle and fighting that will get us through all of any other kind of travesties or anything else that happens to us along the way. But it's along the way. We're along the way to victory. We've had many victories when people thought we couldn't have them. And so that should tell us, that we can't be beaten and that we're going to continue to fight, and we're going to continue until we have the kind of society and ultimately the kind of world that we all deserve to have as people. But we have to have the mindset that we're going to continue on despite what they throw in front of us. It's not going to be able to stay in front of us because of our minds.
Thank you so much. It's so powerful. I thank you. Ms. Mason, would you love, I saw you were unmuted as well.
Yeah, I do want to just come back around to some concrete steps that, Blacks can do to support the men and women serving now and the Indigenous people that are serving right now. And I think that as a social worker, the first thing that comes to my mind is what are the numbers looking like in terms of, we have DLI here and we have the Naval Postgraduate School. And what we want to be looking at is when they come to this community, then we need to invite them to our churches, to
right.
the VFW, and to be members of the NAACP. But we also have to be mindful that they have to be like Harriet Tubman in the Underground Railroad, because when you speak out, the military will shut you down. You can get a dishonorable discharge. I read in the paper today that the Supreme Court has upheld the Doge situation where Trump can just get rid of all these people. He's cutting the military. He's cutting all kinds of social service programs, Medi-Cal, and so on. So we also want to ensure that our men and women that are serving now are protected as well, because we can go out and do the fight for them by holding our elected officials accountable that we put into office. So I think that we need to invite them to our community so that they know they have a family in the Black community, because the thing is that Black people are under attack right now as we speak. And we've got the military on every street corner. We've got ICE coming into our community. So no one is protected. So we're going to have to do a Harriet Tubman Underground Railroad attack on these folks, not risking the active duty military folks right now, because they are really at risk if they do speak out. So I just wanted to, uplift that, because I think it's important for us to not miss that, they can just get rid of you at the drop of a dime.
Mhm.
And so the livelihood of these active duty soldiers is really at risk right now. So I will just leave it at that for now. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And we like to say, we are your military. We are here to serve you. If you see us in a capacity that is harmful, unsafe, unconstitutional, we ask our community, please speak up for us, for the service that you would like to see. So thank you for saying that. I know, Richard, if you wanted to get a chance to close out your...
Sure. The tagline for Black Veterans Project is fight for equity and protect the legacy. And so I just want to say that it's deeply humbled to be in community with the folks that are here. I'm standing on the shoulders of folks like Regina and Mel, and Mr. and Mrs. Mason, rather, and Mr. Mosley, and very, very much excited to be in solidarity with Shalina and Miss Ebony, and as I've gotten to know a little bit more about your work. I think coming off of what Ms. Mason had just said, there was a study that had been put out about maybe 3 years ago that said that Black service members were up to 2.3 times as likely to get out of the military even today with a dishonorable discharge. And so we're likely going to see a great expansion of that, an exacerbation of those statistics. And it is going to be the communities that they return home to that have to bear the brunt, like they always have. And I hope that, the work that Black Veterans Project is endeavoring to do can help to foster some level of reckoning and repair. But we know we have a big fight up against us. And I just hope to continue to be in solidarity and in conversation with folks like Brandy for convening this kind of conversation. And I want to shout out Brandy. The other day, we ran into each other a few weeks ago for the first time. And she was so gracious and so just generous with her support of our work and our organization, and saying that she had been watching it from afar for so long. And those kinds of affirmations do not fall on deaf ears, and they're needed in this moment where things can kind of look a little bleak. So again, I just am very humbled and very, very excited that to be in community with you all. And I know that if we can overcome all the things that Mr. Mason had mentioned, then certainly that this is not going to be a small feat, but it's certainly something that we can overcome. So thank you.
Thank you so much. This is just a dream for me. I've been admiring you all for years, and so to have us in this conversation at this moment is really amazing. Thank you. Shalina and Ebony, I don't know if you all...
Do you want me to go ahead and close out, Brandy?
If anyone has any final thoughts before Shalina closes this out. Yeah, Troy.
Just very quickly, I want to point out that the unification of a multi-ethnic, multi-religious society does not happen organically. Those powers that be that are working to divide us retain power in that division. We have to see beyond our own struggles, particularly the communities that have been historically disenfranchised, and those Americans who may be part of the majority community that believe in the values of equity and equality. We have to look past our differences and come together, because
Yes.
when we are together, we are invincible. And
Hmm.
that's why the work has been put in to divide us. So that
That's
is my
right.
greatest hope, and I'll be working to help bring that to fruition.
Right. It's good. And I'm really glad. I know I've already spoken and maybe I'm out of line here, but but I appreciate what you said, Brother Troy, because when I talk to people about why the Black Panther Party was decimated, why it was destroyed, it wasn't because there were a handful of blacks with pieces, with guns. That was this country can blow up the world 30 times over. I doubt if it would be afraid of a bunch of black people with some guns. But the point that you made about we have to make sure that we come together, that we look at all of those things that we have far more in common with each other than we do than we think might be some difference. The reason why the Black Panther Party was destroyed was because we built coalitions across all ethnic and cultural lines. Our first coalition was with a group called the Brown Berets, who modeled themselves after us. And then we had other groups, the Red Guard, Asian, these Asian revolutionary groups. And so we were bridging all of these gaps, coming together, bringing people together. We were recruiting people for the movement. They had a White Panther Party. We had all kinds of things that were starting to happen in terms of the unity that people saw. Hey, we got all of these things in common. And they started coming together. The Black Panther Party's ability to bridge all of those gaps and bring people together was the reason why we got decimated. And so that's what needs to happen today. And that's, I think, maybe what you were talking about, Brother Troy, is that, we have to do what the Black Panther Party was doing. We have to be the Black Panther Party of today, and bringing all of these people together across classes, across ethnicities, across everything, and to see that we got more in common, because in the long run, when they come after us, they're coming after everybody. They're not making a distinction. And so what we have to do is to be able to come together in that vein. And so that's just something that hit me when you were saying that, Brother Troy, because that is absolutely important. We can't do this in isolation. We have to get together with all of the things that make us brothers and sisters.
Thank you, Mel. So my closing is, I believe that wholeheartedly. Just the bringing together and building community across the coalition, across an intersectionality that we have, that love outnumbers that other side.
Yeah.
So I think that's the case. But I always wanted. I can't wait till our military forces act like UNICEF almost. Like I'm just ready for everybody to put their guns down. but but that, depending, that's, we're not there yet in that kind of utopia, but or protopia, if you will. But that's what my ancestral call is telling me that. So those are kind of transformative justice that I'm hoping and I'm looking for, so that we can, simply just unfold this beautiful world, and just reclaim legacy and just pass something on that is unshakable to our children.
Mm-hmm.
I close in that.
Thank you all so much. And I'll just turn it over to Shalina, having this thought in mind. And I feel so bad because it's a book I read. It's not my own. But the goal is not to look down on or to look up at. The goal is to look across at each other in equity.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would love for us to think of that as we are leaving here today. What would that look like if that's what the goal is for you? And I want to say that is from the founder of the Black Panther Party from the book I'm reading, but I will get you this quote and put it on our networks. before the day is over. But please remember, the goal is equity, and we will have lots of books to share. We are all a well-read group of individuals.
So I'm just throwing up two books. One is Blood, about Vietnam and blacks, and then also Brothers in Arms, which was actually written by Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, but it is about the 761st Tank Battalion. All brothers. They said that black people couldn't fight in tanks, and boy, did they ever prove them wrong. And also that with the 99th and how they saved Teddy Roosevelt when they were going up San Juan Hill, they got pinned down. And they were screaming and yelling for help, and the brothers came up there and saved them. But of course, then after they got saved, then they charged up San Juan Hill, and we didn't get credit for it. But anyway, that's it. I need to shut up.
No, you never. And this is the first of many conversations, and we're honored to have you here, everyone, today. Thank you for sharing. I'm going to leave it to Shalina to close us. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you to our audience. Recent events serve as a painful reminder that our fight for freedom and equitable treatment isn't just fought on battlefields abroad, but also within our own communities, impacting the very families who sacrifice so much for the nation. Thank you for being a part of our discussion, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.